After years abroad, I came home to surprise my mom in the Miami penthouse I bought her. My brother's wife opened the door and said, "I don't want another beggar in my penthouse." Behind her, my mother was on her knees, scrubbing the floor. I walked away without a word, and I made one phone call. 3 hours later, that same woman was begging me to pick up. My name is Ileana Betancourt. I'm 41 years old, and 4 years ago, I paid $2.3 million cash for Penthouse 2 at the Alcazar in Brickell, and I put my mother in it because she spent 30 years bent over a sewing machine so I could have a life. I need you to understand that before anything else. The floor my mother was scrubbing was mine. The door that woman almost closed in my face was mine. And the one call I made took me exactly 4 minutes because I don't yell in hallways. I work in buildings like that one for a living, and I know something my sister-in-law never bothered to learn. In a luxury tower, nobody cares who wears the diamonds. The building only cares what's on file. Let me back up to that morning, because I want you to see it the way I saw it. I'd been overseas for almost 3 years straight. I run residential operations for a hospitality group. I open branded residence towers, the kind with valets and concierges and 40-page rulebooks. Dubai first, then Singapore. 14-hour days, hotel apartments, holidays on video calls. Every Sunday, 8 in the morning, Miami time, I called my mother, and every Sunday, she told me she was fine. The connection was always bad on her end. Quick pause before we continue. I'm Clara, the woman behind this channel. I write these stories because I love that little moment when strangers from different places end up feeling the same thing. If this one already pulled you in, stay with me. It goes deeper from here. The connection was always bad on her end. I know now that it wasn't the connection. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. That was the whole point. I landed at MIA a little after 9 on a Thursday, 26 hours of travel behind me, and I had the taxi take me straight up Brickell Avenue with my luggage still tagged from Changi. I had a box of mangoes on my lap. That sounds ridiculous, I know. My mother is from Hialeah by way of Cuba, and she judges every mango on earth against the ones from her mother's yard. And there's a stand near the airport she loves. I stood there jet-lagged at a fruit stand at 9:40 in the morning, picking out 6 mangoes like they were engagement rings. I kept imagining her face at the door. That was the picture I flew home on. The Alcazar looks the way it looked the day I helped open it. I was on the pre-opening team years before I bought there, which is why I bought there. White stone lobby, cold air, that smell of lilies and floor polish. The concierge on the morning shift was new, some kid who didn't know me, and I didn't announce myself. Owners don't have to. I still had my key card in the same slot of my wallet where it's lived for 4 years, and it flashed green, and the elevator took me up to the top the way it had 100 times, and my heart was beating like a girl's. 41st floor, private landing, double doors of dark wood that I picked out from a catalog in a construction trailer. I could hear music inside, not my mother's music. I rang the bell, and the door opened, and it was Brittany. My brother, Marcos's wife. Silk robe at 10 in the morning, full face of makeup, phone in her hand, and it took her a second, a real, visible second, to process my face, my suitcase, the box of mangoes. I watched the calculation happen in her eyes. And this is the part I'll never forget, because she didn't say hello. She looked at my luggage, and her lip did this small, curled thing, and she said, "I don't want another beggar in my penthouse." Another beggar. Behind her, past the entry table where somebody else's orchids were sitting, the morning light was coming through the terrace glass and laying itself across the great room floor. And on that floor, on her knees, on a folded towel, was my mother. 68 years old, gray polo shirt like a uniform, a bucket beside her, a scrub brush in her hand, working the marble in small circles. Marble, by the way, doesn't get scrubbed on your knees. It gets a flat mop and a neutral cleaner, and I know that because I've written the housekeeping manuals for 3 towers. There is exactly one reason to have a 68-year-old woman scrubbing marble on her knees, and that reason is to keep her on them. My mother looked up. She saw me, and my mother's face didn't do joy. It did fear. She looked at me, and then she looked at Brittany's back, quick, like a woman checking the weather. And her mouth made my name with no sound in it. 26 hours of travel. 6 mangoes. I had a speech in my chest. I'd been writing it since Singapore, and it died right there in the doorway. Here's what I did not do. I did not push past my sister-in-law. I did not scream in that hallway. I've watched 100 family fights in luxury lobbies. Screaming women get walked out by security while the person who stayed calm holds the room. And nobody checks a single fact. Whoever cries loudest looks like the liar. I wasn't going to be a scene in my own building. A scene was what Brittany was dressed for. A scene she would win. So I looked at my mother for one long second. I tried to put something in my face. I don't know if it landed. And I said, to no one in particular, my mistake. And I picked up my suitcase and I walked back to the elevator. And the last thing I heard before the doors kissed shut was Brittany's voice, light as a party, saying, Tere, the floor's drying patchy, mamita, go again by the windows. Mamita. She called my mother Mamita, like a pet name for a maid. I want to be honest about something, because the story doesn't work if I lie to you. 2 years ago, I'm the one who let them in. Marcos called me in Dubai. Their condo was being renovated, mold remediation. They needed 3 months, and Mom had all that space. And I said yes, partly because it's hard to say no from 7,000 miles away, but mostly because of Brittany herself. You have to understand, at my mother's 65th birthday, it was Brittany who organized everything. Rented the back room at the seafood place on Calle Ocho, ordered the flan tower, stood up with a glass of wine and her hand on her chest, and called my mother the mom I never had. My mother cried. I cried on a video call from a construction site. I flew home believing my brother had finally married someone who saw our mother. So when Marcos asked, I didn't just say yes. I filled out the form myself. Because in a building like the Alcazar, family doesn't just move in. The owner signs a guest authorization with names and dates. I signed one, 90 days. I remember typing the dates. That was 21 months ago. The elevator let me out into the lobby, and the kid at the desk asked if I needed a car. And I heard my own voice say, very evenly, yes, thank you. Handling it. That's what my body does instead of crying. I got into the back seat of a black SUV, and I gave the driver the name of a hotel 4 blocks away, one of ours, a Meridian property, where my key card works in a different way. And I sat there with the mangoes on my lap at a red light on Brickell Avenue. And my hands started shaking so hard the box rustled. Not from grief yet, from arithmetic. Because I don't get angry the way people in my family get angry. I get specific. And somewhere between the 41st floor and that red light, a question had put itself in front of everything else. And it was a professional's question. And it was this. How does a woman live in a building for 2 years past her authorization? A building with a governance file on every warm body that passes the lobby? Unless somebody has been filing paperwork about her. Buildings like mine don't run on vibes. Every resident, every occupant, every live-in anything is registered, signed, dated. Somebody had been signing things. I checked into a suite on the 11th floor of my own company's hotel. I put the mangoes on the desk, unopened. I took out my laptop and I logged into the Alcazar owner's portal. My deed, my unit, my login, the same portal I'd helped design the intake forms for. And I pulled up the occupant registry for Penthouse 2. There were 3 names on my unit. The first 2 I expected, and they were wrong in the way I already knew. Marcos Betancourt and Brittany Betancourt, listed as residents, on an authorization that had expired 21 months ago and been renewed twice with signatures I'd never given. It was a third name that stopped my breathing. Teresa Betancourt, my mother, the woman the unit exists for. She wasn't listed as a resident at all. Occupant type, domestic staff, live in, somebody had filed my mother with the building as the help. And on the scanned registry form, in the box marked owner/authorizing party, in cursive that slanted like it was in a hurry, sat a signature, Brittany Betancourt. I didn't sleep that first night. I sat on a hotel bed I could see my own building from, and I read that registry form maybe 40 times. Domestic staff, live in. There's a checkbox for it. Somebody's manicured hand had ticked a box that turned my mother into the help in her own home, and then signed as the owner of a unit I hold the deed to. But here's the thing about working in buildings my whole life. Paper doesn't scare me. Paper is my native language. And a forged story on file in a building that logs everything isn't a wall. It's a confession that hasn't been read yet. I needed two things before I touched anything. I needed my mother's real story, out of that apartment, away from that woman. And I needed the file. All of it, not just what the portal shows an owner. Getting my mother alone took 2 days, and it broke something in me to learn why. She doesn't have her own phone anymore. Marcos put her on his family plan a 1.5 years ago. To simplify, she told me later, which means every call she makes and every text she gets sits in an account my brother's wife can open like a magazine. My Sunday calls, the bad connection, her voice going formal in the middle of a sentence. It was never the connection. It was whoever had just walked into the kitchen behind her. So I did it the Hialeah way. My mother has gone to the same bakery on Palm Avenue every Saturday morning for 30 years. She used to take me there when the guava pastries cost 60 cents. Brittany would sooner die than set foot that far west. Saturday, 9:15 in the morning, I was parked outside La Rosa with 2 cafés con leche going cold on the dash. And at 9:40, my mother came around the corner with her purse held in both hands, the way she holds it in strange neighborhoods now. And I flashed my lights, and she got into my rental car and grabbed my wrist before she even said my name. Her first words were, "Mija, don't fight with them. I'm okay. I have nowhere else." I want you to sit with that sentence the way I had to. My mother, who owns nothing on paper because I put everything in my name for exactly this kind of reason, but who lives in a $2.3 million penthouse her daughter bought outright, believes she has nowhere else. 14 months of someone else's voice in her ear, and a queen was convinced she was a squatter. It came out of her slowly, in pieces, facing the windshield instead of me, because shame does that even to the innocent. It started when Marcos lost the marina contract, and the money got serious. That part I'd already guessed. What I hadn't guessed? They sold their condo. There was no renovation anymore to go home to. That was almost 2 years ago, and nobody told me. And the 3 months I'd authorized, just quietly, never ended. Then Brittany began improving things. That was the word my mother used. Megurando. The housekeeper I paid for, Yamile, 4 years, every Tuesday and Friday, a woman my mother fed lunch and prayed novenas with, was let go 14 months ago. Brittany told her in the lobby in front of the valet stand that her services were no longer needed because the household was consolidating expenses. And then the cleaning just became my mother's. Nobody announced it. Trays left outside the guest wing. A gray polo shirt appearing on her bed, folded, with the tag still on. Guests coming for brunch, and Brittany saying, "Tara, we'll need the terrace glass done before Saturday." Little stones added one at a time until my mother was carrying a wall. Her herb pots went early. My mother has grown albahaca and culantro on a windowsill her entire life. In Cuba, in the Hialeah duplex. And I'd promised her the terrace would be her garden in the sky. Brittany threw the pots out during her first month of redecorating. My mother came home from a doctor's appointment, and the terrace was bare teak and white stone. It looked like a bodega windowsill. Brittany told her. Not even cruelly, my mother said. Like she was explaining rain. That detail did something to my chest that the registry form hadn't. You can forge a form, and I'll fight you. You throw a 68-year-old widow's basil into a trash chute and tell her it looked cheap. That I don't have a procedure for. And her fob. This is the one I'll be repeating in rooms with lawyers in them for a while. About a year ago, my mother's key fob stopped opening things. Not everything. Just the residence elevator, the pool level, the owner's lounge. It still opened the service corridor, the loading dock level, the service elevator that smells like cardboard. My mother thought it was broken. She rode up with the grocery deliveries for a year, and she thought it was a malfunction. And she didn't want to bother anyone at the desk about it because Brittany handled all the building things. Nothing in my buildings malfunctions in that particular shape. Access is permissioned by occupant class. Staff fobs open staff doors. Somebody had reclassified my mother in the system. And the system, which is a very obedient dog, had simply agreed. I didn't tell my mother any of what I was thinking. I told her to go home, change nothing, say nothing, and be patient with me for a few days. I put the cold café, con lèche, in her hands, and I said the sentence I'd been assembling for 2 days. Mama, you're not a guest there. You're the reason that apartment exists. Give me 1 week. She looked at me the way she used to look at the sewing when a dress was almost due, measuring whether the time left was enough. And she nodded, and she went, with her purse in both hands. That night, 11:40, I walked into my own lobby, dressed like the flight over. No makeup, hair up, glasses, because the night shift was what I wanted. Weeknight, late. The morning concierge was new, but the night man was not. Osvaldo has stood that desk since before the building had furniture. I trained his onboarding class myself, back on the pre-opening team, and when he saw me, his whole face opened up, and then, very fast, went careful. A concierge's face going careful is a paragraph. We talked for 40 minutes at the quiet end of the desk, and Osvaldo gave me the building's view of my family in the low voice good concierges keep for true things. La Señora Brittany told the staff months ago, casually, repeatedly, that she was the owner of PH2. Received packages as the owner. Signed renewal paperwork at that very desk as the owner. Reserved the Sky Lounge for this season's committee brunch. As the owner, hosting. And my mother? Osvaldo looked at his hands. The staff liked Teresa. She came through the service corridor with her cart, and she always apologized for the trouble. And last Christmas, she'd hemmed his daughter's quinceañera dress in the staff break room, and La Señora, Brittany, had tipped her at the door in front of the porters. Tipped her. A folded 20 pressed into my mother's palm in public for the performance of being staff. He'd kept things too, because a good night concierge is the building's memory. The date Yamile was dismissed in the lobby. The log entry when PH2 requested the occupant class change on the fob. A copy of the Sky Lounge reservation sheet with owner event B. Betancourt written across the top in loopy cursive. The next morning, I called Denise Whitfield, the general manager. I trained Denise too. Pre-opening, back when the lobby was still concrete and rain boots. But I want to be honest, what happened next didn't happen because she likes me. It happened because I'm the deed. She pulled the unit file with a witness from her office in the room, which is the correct protocol, and I'd have been disappointed by anything less. Everything came out onto the conference table in tabbed folders. My original guest authorization, 90 days, my signature, expired 21 months ago. 2 renewal forms after it, executed by owner, in handwriting that slants like, it's late for something. The occupant registry amendment reclassifying Teresa Betancourt as live-in domestic staff. Same slant. The fob permission change, time-stamped, requested from inside PH2. Not one document in that folder had been signed by the person whose name is on the deed. Denise laid her palm flat on the stack, And she looked at me, and she said the most beautifully bureaucratic sentence I have ever heard. None of these instruments were executed by the registered owner. The building has a problem. Yes, the building had a problem. And I sat there, calm as a closing, while a thought I'd been holding underwater for 3 days finally surfaced. The money. Because for 4 years, on the 2nd of every month, I have wired $3,000 to a household account for that penthouse. Groceries, Yamale, my mother's hair salon, her doctor's parking, whatever she wanted. That was the entire point of it. An account Marcos set up so Mom doesn't have to deal with bills. Yamale had been gone 14 months. My mother was buying groceries out of her Social Security and mending her own uniform. So where, exactly, had 14 months of $3,000 a month been landing? I did the multiplication right there on the leather folder in Denise's office, in pen, like it was somebody else's audit. 14 months, $42,000. People imagine revenge as something loud, a confrontation, a speech, a slammed door. I've never once seen loud work. What works is a woman at a desk with a phone, a file, and standing. So let me tell you exactly what the one call was, because the premise of my whole life is that the boring version is the deadly one. Friday, 2:11 in the afternoon. I was back in my suite with the unit file copied into a folder Denise's assistant had tabbed for me, and I called the Alcazar's management office. The main line, not Denise's cell, because I wanted the call logged the way any owner's call gets logged. I identified myself, Elena Betancourt, registered owner, Penthouse 2. I gave my owner PIN, the one Brittany never had, which is why she'd been signing at the desk like a duchess instead of using the portal like an owner. And then I made 4 requests. And I made them in the order a person makes them when she has written building policy for a living. 1. A formal audit of the occupant registry for my unit, effective immediately, with every instrument not executed by the registered owner flagged as invalid. That's not me being clever. That's their own governance manual, Section 4, and I know because I wrote the first draft of it in a construction trailer. 2. Suspension of all access credentials issued under those invalid instruments. Both fobs, the parking transponder, the valet privileges, the charge account at the pool cafe that I learned that afternoon had been drinking from my annual dues. Access follows authorization. No authorization, no access. The system is a very obedient dog. 3. Restoration of Teresa Betancourt to the registry as what she has always been, authorized resident, family of the owner, and her fob returned to full residential access within the hour. My mother would ride the residence elevator that same night, whether anyone else in that apartment liked it or not. 4. Cancellation of the Sky Lounge reservation booked under owner privileges by a person who is not the owner. And a notice of unauthorized occupancy prepared per the association's own process to Marcos and Brittany Betancourt, occupants without standing in Penthouse 2. The woman on the line read it all back to me like a dinner order. 4 minutes, start to finish. I thanked her, I hung up, and I sat there in the enormous quiet of a hotel room where the only sound was the air conditioning. And I'm not going to pretend my hands weren't shaking again. You can be right down to the last comma and still shake. Then I ordered a café con leche from room service, and I waited for physics to do what physics does. Here's the timeline of the next 3 hours. And I know it to the minute because Osvaldo texted me from the desk like a man narrating a hurricane from inside the weather station. 2:50. The valet declines to bring the Range Rover around. The transponder's dead, and the vehicle isn't on an authorized account. Brittany, in athleisure, tells the valet captain there's obviously a computer problem and takes an Uber to her Pilates class. That detail matters. Her building just told her no for the first time, and her answer was that the computer must be wrong. Some people have never once heard a no that stuck. It makes them slow. 3:40. The committee's event coordinator receives the Sky Lounge cancellation, automated, polite, copy to the reserving party. This is the one that lands, because it isn't private. 20 women on that thread. The brunch, the season's brunch, Britney's audition into that world. Unbooked, in writing, in front of everyone. 4:05, my phone. First voicemail, and her voice is still doing brunch chair warmth with a blade under it. Ileana, there's some kind of glitch with the building, sweetie. They're saying things about authorizations. I know you're in town, which, by the way, you could have called first. That was so awkward this morning for both of us. Anyway, call me back. We'll fix this little mix-up. This little mix-up, the woman had my mother filed as staff. And it was a mix-up. 4:30. She's back from Pilates. Her fob dies in her hand at the residence elevator, in front of 2 neighbors and the porters. The panel blinks red, and the new kid at the desk, following procedure beautifully, someone give that boy a raise, offers to sign her in as a guest of a registered resident. A guest. Osvaldo's text was 3 words and a period. She is screaming. 4:50. Second voicemail. No more brunch chair. What did you do? You call them back right now and tell them this is a misunderstanding. Marcos, I have 400 people. It's 20, but panic inflates. I have an event. You vindictive little... You were gone, Elena. Somebody had to run that house. Call them back. 5:15. The notice of unauthorized occupancy is delivered to the door of PH2 by building staff with a witness per procedure. Signed for. Timestamped 5:40, third voicemail, and this is the one the title of my story lives in, because the voice on it is one I'd never heard from her. Small, wet, shaking. Ileana, please pick up. Please. I'm begging you, okay? Is that what you want? I'm begging. The committee brunch is in 8 days. Everyone already, if the lounge is canceled, they'll know something's wrong. They'll ask why. Please, I will do anything. I'll apologize to your mom. Just call me back before anyone finds out. Please. 3 hours and 29 minutes from my call. She was begging me to pick up, not to forgive her. I played that voicemail twice more, standing at the window with the terrace lights of my own building glittering back at me, and both times I heard the same thing. Every please in it was about the lounge, the committee, the being found out. There's not one sentence in that voicemail about the woman on her knees on my marble. That's when I stopped feeling even the little bit sorry that had been trying to form in me since her voice cracked. She wasn't sorry. She was cornered. Those are different animals, and only one of them changes. I didn't call back. I texted one line, all building matters, go through management now, and I blocked the number, and I ate dinner alone with my folder, like a woman on a date with the truth. At 9 that night, my brother found me. The front desk called up, there's a gentleman, no appointment, and I came down to the lobby bar because you meet weak men in public places where they can't perform. Marcos looked awful. I hadn't seen him in person in almost 3 years, and he'd gotten heavier and smaller at the same time, and he sat down across from me and tried, for exactly 1 minute, to be angry. The building humiliated his wife. Family doesn't do this to family. I let it run out of gas. And then I put a printed copy of my mother's registry page on the table between us and turned it to face him. And I watched my little brother read the words, domestic staff, live in next to our mother's name. And he didn't already know. I'll give him that one thing. Whatever he is, his face didn't know. And then it all came out of him. The way it always has since he was 8 years old and broke something. They sold their condo almost 2 years ago. I knew that. What I didn't know, the marina business didn't just lose the contract, it died owing money. Vendors, a bridge loan, a personal guarantee he'd signed like a genius. The condo money went to keep the corpse breathing, and then to keep Britney's Miami alive. The car lease, the Pilates, the committee donations, because you have to give to be invited to give more. They'd been broke, fully broke, for over a year, in my penthouse, eating off the household account. My money, Mom's grocery money. He called it borrowing. He said, We were going to catch up when things turned, and I said, Marcos, Yemile cleaned for Mom for 4 years, and Brittany fired her in the lobby. Mom scrubs the floors. Did things feel like they were turning? And my brother, 38 years old, put his face in his hands at a hotel bar and cried, and the only thing he could think to ask me, the only actual request my brother made that night was, please don't cancel the brunch venue. If the brunch falls apart, Brit falls apart. You don't know what she's like when... And he stopped himself. I looked at him for a long time, and I felt something I hadn't planned on feeling, which was pity. The kind that doesn't soften anything, the kind that just makes everything sadder and clearer. And I told him the truth. The lounge is already gone. It was never hers to book. I paid for his club soda, which felt symbolic, and I went upstairs. At 11:20, my phone lit up. Osvaldo, one last dispatch from the weather station, a screenshot forwarded from someone on the committee thread. Brittany, undeterred, unbowed, unbelievable, had sent 20 women a message dripping with exclamation points, and I read it standing in the dark by the window with my whole building glittering back at me. Ladies, change of plans. The lounge is under maintenance, so that means the brunch is upgrading. Saturday, 11 a.m. at my penthouse. PH2. Trust me, the view is better from the top floor anyway. At my penthouse. Saturday, 11 a.m., she was going to throw the party inside my unit, with a notice of unauthorized occupancy sitting signed for on her entry table, and let my mother in a gray polo carry the trays. I stood there a while, and then, God help me, I smiled. Because a room full of the exact people she needs to impress, inside the one address in Miami where every single document has my name on it, that isn't a problem. That's a venue. I want to tell you what the movies get wrong about a moment like this. In the movies, the wronged woman finds the smoking gun and the story's over by dinner. In real life, the week between my phone call and that brunch was the longest of my life. Because institutions, even when they're on your side, even when you helped build them, move like barges. And villains get to file paper too. Monday morning, Denise called me into the management office, and the association's attorney was on the speaker. And the news came in 2 flavors. The good flavor, the audit was done. Every instrument signed by Brittany was flagged invalid, and the registry was corrected, and my mother's fob had been restored to full residential access Friday night. Osvaldo told me she rode the residence elevator up from the lobby that evening for the first time in a year, and that he pressed the button for her floor like it was nothing, and that she watched the numbers the whole way with her hand flat on the brass rail. I keep that image where I can reach it. The bad flavor, removal takes time. The association could strip amenities and access from unauthorized occupants, but the association does not drag people out of units. That power belongs to the owner through process. And when the attorney used the phrase, occupants of long duration may assert residency, I finished the paragraph for him because I've sat through this seminar from the other side of the table. Stay somewhere long enough, get your mail there, and you can force an owner into a formal removal proceeding even when you've never paid a dime and never signed a lease. It isn't fast. It's paperwork and patience and doing every step so cleanly that there's nothing to appeal. So that same afternoon, through an attorney whose office you will never see in this story, because I kept the lawyers where they belong, in the background drafting, I served my own notice as owner. 15 days to vacate Penthouse 2. Hand-delivered, witnessed, time-stamped, the boring way. The barge had left the dock. It just wasn't going to arrive before Saturday, which meant the brunch was happening. 20 guests, inside my unit, hosted by a woman with a notice on her entry table and no working fob, because here's the loophole she found, and I'll admit it was resourceful. Guests of a registered resident can be signed in at the desk. And there was still one registered resident in PH2 whose name could anchor a guest list. She used my mother. She put the committee brunch guest list under Teresa Betancourt, under the fob of the woman she'd filed as staff. And the desk had no grounds to refuse, because my mother, God bless her obedient heart, confirmed it when the kid called up. I got the guest list notification on the owner's portal Tuesday night, 20 names anchored to my mother's account, and I sat with it for a long moment, and then I decided something that I want to say out loud in this story. I could have killed that brunch with one more phone call. Owner instruction, no gatherings over 10, house rules, done. And I chose not to. You'll see why. Wednesday, Brittany's paper arrived. Denise forwarded it with a subject line that was just the word received. A 2-page document printed at home, notarized at a shipping store 13 months ago, titled Household Management Agreement. In it, Teresa Betancourt, identified, and I had to read this twice, as household principal, appoints Brittany Betancourt as manager of the residence, with authority over staffing, vendors, scheduling, and residence administration. My mother's signature at the bottom, real. Hers, that careful convent school cursive. Brittany's cover email to the association said the agreement demonstrated she'd had delegated authority for the registry filings all along, and that this was a family administrative matter being weaponized by an estranged relative. Estranged relative. Me. The deed. For about 90 seconds, sitting in my hotel with that PDF open, I felt the floor tilt. Not legally. The attorney's office needed one paragraph to point out that my mother isn't the owner and can't delegate authority she never had, so the agreement transferred exactly nothing. Legally, it was confetti with a notary stamp. What made the floor tilt was picturing it, 13 months ago. My mother at that kitchen counter with a pen, and Brittany above her, warm as the birthday toast. Sign this, Terry. It just makes it official that I handle the annoying stuff so you don't have to. My mother told me later she'd been relieved to sign. She thought it meant she was being taken care of. That's what these people do. They don't twist your arm, they twist the meaning of the paper, and they count on shame to keep everyone from ever comparing notes. Well, I am immune to that particular strategy. Comparing notes is my profession. So Thursday and Friday, I built the counter file, and I did it the way I'd build a case against a bad vendor. No drama, just documents with dates on them, each one a plank. Thursday morning, my wire records. 14 transfers of $3,000 since Yamale was dismissed, $42,000 into an account labeled Betancourt Household. This is why I love making these stories. People think silence means weakness until the proof is already in the room. Stay with me. We're right at that point. $42,000 into an account labeled Betancourt Household, plus the 4 years before that when the money was actually doing its job. Printed, highlighted, tabbed. Thursday noon, Hialeah. I found Yamile through my mother's church, because of course through my mother's church, and I took her to lunch, and I apologized to her, which I noticed no one else had ever thought to do. She'd been paid through that household account for 4 years, until the payments just stopped 14 months ago, same week as the lobby dismissal. She'd kept her last pay stub. She's kept every pay stub of her working life in a plastic envelope. And when she saw my face at whatever it was doing at that moment, she patted my hand and told me the thing that broke me at a Cuban lunch counter on a Thursday. That some Tuesdays she still cooks extra and drops a container with the porters, marked for Teresa. Because your mother fed me for 4 years, mija. The rich lady doesn't check what comes up with the packages. She signed a statement for the attorney's office that afternoon. Date of dismissal, who dismissed her, what was said in that lobby. Osvaldo had already signed his. Thursday afternoon, my mother's doctor, her actual doctor, the appointment Brittany's scheduling never seemed to find room for. Bursitis in both knees, worse on the right, dermatitis on both hands from industrial cleaner used without gloves. All of it charted in clinical language, with photographs in a medical record dated 2 days before that brunch. The doctor's assistant helped us make a report to Adult Protective Services before we left the office. Exploitation of a vulnerable adult, financial and labor, report number, caseworker assigned. I want to be precise here, because precision is the whole religion of this story. I didn't file that report as a weapon. I filed it because it was true, And because true things filed with the state grow roots that no family meeting can pull up later. Friday, the last plank. The building's charge records, the pool cafe account, the valet gratuities, the package concierge, every owner charge Brittany had signed against my dues, itemized by a system that never forgets anything. $1,100 of cortaditos and cabana rentals, signed B. Betancourt, owner, PH2. And all week, while I built, the family worked the phones. Brittany's mother, a woman I've met twice at weddings, left me a voicemail in a lockjaw country club voice about how family does not evict family, whatever little dispute this is, and how her daughter had single-handedly held that household together. Marcos called twice. The first call, he was Brittany's, measured, coached, asking if we couldn't all just sit down after the brunch when things calmed, hearing himself say the words. The second call came at 11 at night. No coaching. His voice low, like the house was asleep around him, and what he said was, "She's got Mom polishing the serving trays for Saturday." Ely, I didn't know about the registry thing. I swear on Poppy. But I know about this. I'm watching it. Tell me what to do. My baby brother, asking me for instructions in the dark. It wasn't redemption. A man doesn't get redemption for whispering. But I noted the date and time like everything else that week. First recorded instance of a spine. And then Saturday, -1. Friday evening, my mother called me from the bakery. She'd started inventing errands, my mother. The woman was running a resistance cell out of La Rosa, and her voice was strange, half fear and half something I hadn't heard in it since before I left for Dubai. Mischief, maybe. She said Brittany had laid the gray polo out on her bed for the morning, freshly ironed with the little apron, and told her the girls would need mimosas on the terrace by 11:15 sharp. She said, "Mija, do I tell her no? I want to tell her no." I looked out my hotel window at my building, one tower over, 41 floors of glass with the last sun on it, and I said, "No, Mama, don't tell her no. Iron nothing, argue nothing. Wear it." She was quiet. Then, "Wear it. One last time," I said. "And when the doorbell starts ringing tomorrow, keep your eyes on the service corridor. Your daughter's coming up the back way." Saturday came up gold and blue. One of those Miami mornings that looks like the brochure Miami sells the rest of the world. I was awake at 6. I ironed my own blouse. White, plain, the kind of thing you'd never notice. And I drank my coffee, standing at the window like it was a normal day. And at 9:40, I drove to my own building and parked in the visitor row because my spot in the garage had a leased Range Rover in it for 11 more days. I did not go through the lobby. I went in through the loading dock, past the cardboard smell and the humming freight room, and I badged into the service corridor with my owner's fob, and I rode up to the 41st floor in the service elevator. The one with the pads on the walls and the scuffed steel door. The one my mother rode for a year, thinking it was broken, apologizing to the porters for the trouble. I stood in it alone for 41 floors, and I put my hand flat on the brass rail. And I'm not ashamed to tell you, I talked to it. Quietly, like a crazy woman. I said, "Last time, Mama, this elevator will never carry you again." Denise met me in the service vestibule at 10:50, in full general manager blacks, with a leather folio under her arm, and a porter behind her as witness. Because here's what I want you to understand about how this was going to go. I wasn't crashing a party. The owner of a unit, accompanied by building management, following up in person on a served notice and an access audit. That's not a scene. That's an inspection. Everything Brittany had built in that apartment was a performance. And everything I was carrying was a procedure. And I had bet my whole week, my whole life, it felt like, on the difference. Through the service door, I could hear the party, glasses, that bright overlapping laughter women do at things like this, someone's playlist of inoffensive bossa nova. 20 guests anchored to my mother's fob. 11:05. Mimosas on the terrace by 11:15 sharp. We went in at 11:10 through the kitchen. The kitchen, my kitchen, the marble I chose from a slab yard in Doral, was staging trays of little tostada rounds, and standing at the island in the gray polo and the little apron, with her hair pinned back and her hands red, was my mother. She saw me and her whole body straightened one vertebra at a time. I stopped, and I took her by the shoulders, and I said, in Spanish, low, "You are the lady of this house. Go stand where the lady stands." And my mother, 68 years old, arthritis in both knees, untied the apron herself. Slowly, with ceremony, like a soldier taking off a rank that was never hers. She folded it once, laid it on the island next to the tostadas, and she walked out of that kitchen ahead of me, through her own great room, in front of everyone, with her chin doing something I hadn't seen since my father was alive. The room went quiet in sections, the way rooms do. First, the women nearest the kitchen, then the terrace doors, then all of it, 20 pastel dresses turning like a garden in wind, and Brittany, mid-story at the center of the terrace, in white linen, arm out, holding a mimosa, turned last. I watched her face do the same arithmetic it had done at the front door 10 days earlier. The suitcase math. Except this time, the numbers wouldn't add, because standing next to me was the building's general manager in uniform blacks, and a porter, and Brittany's guests could see the folio. "Ileana," she said, and her voice went for warm and landed on shrill. "Everyone, this is my sister-in-law. She's visiting from overseas." And honest to God, she gestured at me with the mimosa like a tour guide. Still selling. On the deck of the sinking ship, this woman was still selling cabins. I didn't raise my voice. "I've told you, loud loses." I said, "Don't stop the party on my account. I'm here on building business. It'll take 5 minutes." And I nodded to Denise, and we did it exactly the way we'd rehearsed it in her office the day before. Because yes, we rehearsed. You drill the fire procedure before the fire. Denise opened the folio on the dining table, my dining table, and laid the documents down one at a time, each with one flat sentence in her general manager voice, a voice engineered over 20 years to be impossible to argue with because it argues with no one. The recorded deed to Penthouse 2. The registered owner of this unit is Elena Betancourt, sole owner, 4 years. The guest authorization, the only authorization ever executed by the owner, 90 days, expired 21 months ago. The 2 renewals and the registry amendment, executed by a person with no authority to sign. The building has voided them. The fob log, access reclassification for Mrs. Teresa Betancourt, requested from this unit, restricting a resident to service areas for 11 months. And the notice, served Monday. The occupancy of Marcos and Brittany Betancourt ends in 11 days. Nobody moved. The bossa nova kept going, obscenely, until someone near the speaker had the sense to stop it. And here's the moment I'd bet the week on. I never said the word staff out loud. I didn't have to. Because the committee chair, a tall, silver-haired woman named Mrs. Halloran, who has run that charity circuit since before Brittany could spell Coral Gables, and who had been standing near the table with her reading glasses already on her nose from examining the place cards. Mrs. Halloran leaned in, the way women like her feel entitled to lean in to any document in any room, and she picked up the voided registry page with her own hand, and she read it. And I watched her arrive, line by line, at the box. Occupant type, domestic staff, live-in. Name, Teresa Betancourt. And then Mrs. Halloran looked up, over her glasses, across the room, at my mother, whom she had watched, 40 minutes earlier, refill her glass in a gray polo and an apron, and then at Brittany. And she said, into the silence, the 11 quietest, most surgical words I have ever heard at a party. "Brittany, is this your husband's mother? On file as your maid?" What Brittany did next, no enemy could have scripted for her. She laughed, one bright, wrong note, and said, "It's a paperwork thing." And then, when Mrs. Halloran's face didn't move, she pivoted, in front of 20 witnesses, to the truth as she actually believes it. She liked helping. Terry likes to feel useful, ask anyone. And I have run this household for 2 years, while certain people were off in Dubai playing hotel. Somebody had to manage things. I was the one holding this family. And she heard it. She finally heard her own voice saying, I was the one in a room where every flat surface held a document that said otherwise. And she stopped. And the mimosa was shaking hard enough to spill on the white linen. And she went for the only door left. The oldest one. Marcos, she said, tell them. And my brother, who had been standing by the terrace glass this whole time, gray-faced, next to the trays he'd been carrying because she'd had him ferrying trays too. It turns out the little prince demoted below deck with the rest of us. My brother looked at his wife for a long, terrible second, and then he crossed the room, past her, to our mother, and he took Mom's hand, the red, cracked, 68-year-old hand, and he held it up slightly, like evidence, like something at a christening, and he said, not loudly, to the room and to his wife and to himself, this is the lady of the house. It's her daughter's house. And his voice went, I let it happen in front of me. He turned to Mrs. Halloran like a man volunteering for something. Nobody made my mother do anything. My wife assigned it. I watched. You could hear the ice melting in the pitchers. Mrs. Halloran set the registry page down, squared it against the table edge, a small, fastidious gesture I will love until I die, took off her reading glasses and said, Ladies, I believe we've overstayed. And 20 women put down 20 glasses at 11:25 in the morning and gathered 20 little handbags, and the ones who said goodbye said it to my mother. Not one of them said it to Brittany. I watched Mrs. Halloran pause at the door, in front of the entry table, with somebody else's orchids on it, and press my mother's hand with both of hers, and say something low that made Mama's eyes shine. I found out later, because my mother repeated it that night like a rosary. Senora Betancourt, I hope you'll come to our May luncheon, as my guest. The door closed on the last pastel dress at 11:31, and in the ringing quiet of my own great room, Brittany standing alone in the middle of it, in white linen, on marble my mother had scrubbed on her knees, in a penthouse where the truth was laid out in tabs on the dining table, Denise stepped forward, precise as noon, and held out the folio's last page and a pen. Mrs. Betancourt, she said, building acknowledgement of the served notice, 11 days remain. I'll need your signature. And Brittany, with no room left to sell, no audience left to sell it to, and her committee walking out through her lobby forever, looked around for someone to appeal the whole morning to, and there was no one left who was hers. So she signed. The porter witnessed it. Her cursive slanted like it was in a hurry. They didn't use all 11 days. They were out in 8. I wasn't there for the moving trucks. I was told by Osvaldo in dispatches, because some habits are permanent now. 2 trucks, a Tuesday, rain. Brittany supervised the wrapping of furniture that wasn't hers to wrap until Denise, patient as tide, walked up with the unit inventory from my closing file and a porter, and went line by line. The orchid pots stayed. The espresso machine Brittany called hers stayed, because the household account had paid for it. And by then, everyone understood with great precision whose account that was. What left was clothes, gym equipment, 40 linear feet of white linen, and a marriage with a bridge loan against it. They drove north to her parents' house in Boca. And I'm told, not by Osvaldo this time, by Marcos, who tells me things now, carefully, like a man on probation, because he is, that her mother had the guest room done up beautifully, and that Brittany cried harder about the guest room than she had about anything in the penthouse. Boca is where her story ends, as far as I'm concerned. I don't follow it. People kept asking me for months if I'd heard what she was telling everyone, and the honest answer is no. And the honest reason is that the version of me who needed to know lost custody of my time. But consequences aren't a moving truck. Consequences are paper. And the paper finished its work all through that spring. The $42,000 came back the boring way, which is the only way money really comes back. A demand letter from the attorney's office, 14 months of transfers, Yamaled's pay stubs, and statement the charge account itemization, the APS case number, all of it exhibits, offering one path that avoided a courtroom. Full repayment on a schedule, in writing, signed. Marcos signed within the week. Against advice, I'm told, meaning against Brittany's mother's lawyer, who wanted to argue about it. And for once in his life, my brother didn't want to argue. He'd taken a job by then. Operations at a boatyard in Fort Lauderdale. Actual work, salaried, the kind his father would have recognized. And on the 2nd of every month, with a punctuality he never once managed for a birthday, $800 lands against the debt. It will take him 4 years and change. I told him I'd forgive the balance the day Mom decides he's earned it, and not one day before. And he said, okay. And he didn't ask when that would be, which is the first intelligent question he never asked. The Adult Protective Services case closed at the end of April. Resolved, exploitation ceased, safeguards in place. The caseworker, a tired, kind woman with a caseload you don't want to imagine, did her exit visit at the Penthouse, drank my mother's cafe, inspected the corrected registry, and the new banking. Mama's accounts are hers alone now. The household account exists again with only 2 signatures on earth that move it, mine and hers. And she stood on the terrace a moment before she left and said, most of these, I closed because the family scattered. This one actually got fixed. I keep that one where I keep the elevator image. The committee did what committees do. No announcement, no scene, just a spring gala program printed without a certain name on the host committee page, and a database that quietly forgot a certain email address. Mrs. Halloran, on the other hand, was as good as her word. The May luncheon invitation came on real cardstock, addressed to Senora Teresa Betancourt, and my mother wore blue, and I drove her. And I sat in the car in the parking lot like a bodyguard because she asked me to be nearby. And she came out 2 hours later, having promised the alterations committee, there is, apparently, an alterations committee, that she would supervise the hemming of the gala tablecloths. Supervise. My mother has not hemmed a single tablecloth. She points, and other women pin. She has waited 50 years for this arrangement. The registry reads the way it should have always read. I stood at the desk while it was entered and made the kid print it. Teresa Betancourt, resident, family of owner. Full access. Her fob opens everything now, including the owner's lounge where she has established a Thursday canasta game that Osvaldo tells me has become mildly notorious. Yamile came back. Tuesdays and Fridays, plus a raise, paid from my account directly. No household middlemen ever again. And the first Tuesday, she and my mother cooked together for 4 hours and cleaned nothing, which I believe was the point. And the gray polo. I want you to know exactly what happened to it, because my family understands objects better than we understand speeches. On my mother's first Saturday, as the only lady of that house, she walked the polo, the little apron, the scrub brush, and that folded kneeling towel down the hall to the trash chute, the residence chute on the residence floor. And she held the door open, and she looked at me, and she said, you do it, my knees are retired. So I did. 41 floors. We listened. It was a very satisfying sound, and then it was gone. And neither of us has mentioned any of those objects since, except that every so often, apropos of nothing, my mother says, my knees are retired to strangers, at canasta, in a tone that invites no questions. I took the Miami job. Meridian had been circling me about running the Latin America portfolio out of the home office for a year. And I'd kept saying the timing wasn't right. And then one morning in April, I woke up in my hotel suite, looked at my building across the skyline, and understood that I'd spent 6 years building homes with other people's names on them, an ocean away from the only person whose name I'd ever put on one. I signed that week. I kept the penthouse in my name. That lesson is permanent, love is love, and title is title. But I bought myself a small place, 11 blocks away, close enough that my mother can summon me for lunch, far enough that we both have doors. She approved of this arrangement in the specific way she approves of things she pretends were her idea. Brittany, I saw exactly once more. October, a farmer's market in the Gables, 20 feet of distance, unavoidable sightline. She looked smaller. Not humbled, I want to be accurate, always accurate. Reduced, like something left in the sun. She saw me, and her face began assembling something. An approach, an opening line, a version, and I watched her weigh it, and I did nothing at all. I didn't glare. I didn't smile. I gave her the exact face I'd give a stranger, which is what the file says she is. No standing, no access, no authorization on record. She put her sunglasses on and turned toward the flower stall. That was the entire scene. The best consequence I own is that she is not a character in my life anymore. She's a closed folder in a cabinet I paid a lot of money to lock. Which brings me to a Saturday morning in May, the one I flew home on, even though I didn't know it yet when I boarded that plane with 6 mangoes. 8 o'clock, gold and blue again. The terrace of Penthouse 2, 41 floors up, the bay doing its glitter. Along the west rail, where there used to be nothing but bare teak and white stone because a windowsill garden looked cheap, there are now 14 terracotta pots. Because my mother and I drove to a garden center in Kendall, like 2 women planning a heist, and filled the whole cart. Albahaca, culantro, a yerba buena, a tomato plant that has no business succeeding at this altitude, and will therefore obviously succeed. My mother is on her knees, on a foam gardening cushion with a handle, $40, best money of my life. And her hands are in the dirt up to the wrists. And she is ordering me around like a foreman. More water. Not there. You crowd the basil, it sulks. Like your brother. She is on her knees on her own terrace because she chooses to be, planting food in the sky above the city that watched her sow for 30 years. And there is cafe going cold on the little table because the garden is more interesting. And her fob is in her pocket and it opens every door in the building. And the deed is in a vault, and it says her daughter's name, and the registry downstairs says, resident, family of owner, and every word of it is true. I stood at the rail with dirt on my hands, and my mother pointed her trowel at the skyline like a woman who owns the view, and told me to stop admiring Miami and pass her the culantro. So I did. That's the whole ending. That's everything I came home for. My mother, on her knees in her own garden, 68 years old, sulking basil, retired knees, giving orders. The lady of the house. I'm Clara, and this is my channel. I love making these stories and sharing them with people across the world. If this one found you at the right time, subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.